Okay, welcome back to part 2 of Dr Marguerite Johnson's lecture on ghosts in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Enjoy.
The Afterlife Discussions, brought to you by Newcastle Ghost Tours and the Old George and Dragon Restaurant, East Maitland. For more information, go to newcastleghosttours.com.au.
Now the Greeks continue to write about ghosts till the Romans invade them and more or less boss them around and take over. But one thing that fascinates me is that ghosts are used in magic. So this is what we would call necromancy. This is bringing them back to tell us the future. This type of magic was feared in the ancient world, and a necromancer was someone you stayed away from. And there were people who scared the living daylights out of other people. Now, the Greeks actively used ghosts in other ways, and I'm going to sort of give you a little diversion into one of my research interests, which is magic. The ghosts were used in other contexts. So we've left Homer now behind in the archaic world, and we've moved on to the 400s. So this is the 5th century BC, the classical age. This is when the Parthenon and the Acropolis and all of those gorgeous monuments were built. Now, while the Greeks were going through this renaissance, flourishing of arts and literature, they were whipping these up as well. And these are what we call curse tablets. And this is something that classicists, when they first started to discover them, around about 200 years ago, do you know these things were basically hidden? Because the men who used to study classics thought, we want everyone to think the Greeks wandered around in, thinking philosophical thoughts and living this beautiful life, not doing this. So they were hidden for a very long time. Now, these are things called curse tablets, katadesmoi, the Greeks call them, and this was widespread. Now, this little one here was found in the main cemetery in Athens, and there are thousands of these. Now, what are they? They involve ghosts. So, these things are made of lead. This is clearly you can see it's a little coffin. And I say to my students when we look at these things, do you think these are cute? And they say absolutely not. These little things here were made of lead. They were probably about the size of my hand. And they curse people. This is a judicial curse. So someone is threatening to take someone to court, and someone has whipped a spell up to try and stop the person taking them to court. And when you look at it up close, it's actually inscribed with a spell, and the spell is on the top and the bottom. And this poor little person here has got a name on him, and he's the name is the person who is going to take the spellcaster to court. It's put on his leg. Now you notice his little arms are twisted, and this is the idea of sympathetic magic, like affects like. What I do to this figure, I do to you. So as the little man is twisted, so I'm immobilizing you. You are twisted. And as I put the little man in the container, I'm containing you, and I'm controlling you, and you can't take me to court. Hundreds and hundreds of these little things have been dug up. Why was it put into a cemetery? And it's like a little coffin. Usually they're just little bits of rolled up lead. They'd whip the spell out, roll it up and pin it with a nail, and then they drop them, usually in cemeteries. Now, why did they put them in cemeteries? Because the poor old ghosts who are restless were used as the local mailmen to the land of the dead. So the spellcasters believed, if I dig a hole and I put it into the ground in the cemetery, it's bound to be a ghost that's going to come along, pick this up, read it, and take it down to the land of the dead. What it's got to do with the land of the dead is this, that the gods and goddesses who lived down there, Hades or Pluto, and Persephone, his wife, Hecate, when she's down there too at different times, someone down there is going to work the spell. And quite often on these things, it will say, Hades, work this spell. Persephone, the wife of Hades, help this spell be enacted. So the ghosts delivered them. And they also wrote the names of ghosts on them too. So if you didn't want, you know, the king of the land of the dead to work your magic, you would often say, you know, you'd name a ghost. I know you haunt this place. I know you were buried here, but you're still not at rest. Could you cause this person not to take me to court? So the poor old ghosts were roped in to working these sorts of spells. So not only necromancy, but the working of magic spells in terms of these curse tablets were very, very popular as well. This is a curse. This is what was written on one of them. So it's been dug up and translated. Whenever you, Apasianix, read this text, but neither will you, Apasianix, ever read this text, nor will Neophanes ever bring a case against Axibolos. But just as you, Apasianix, lie here ineffectual, so too may Neophanes become ineffectual and nothing. You flick over the piece of lead, and side 2 basically repeats the spell. Now, this particular spell that we have that's come off a piece of lead, what they're doing is calling on a ghost, and the ghost is Pasianix. Can you make this person stop threatening me? And just as you usually lay quiet in your grave, can you make the person who's threatening to take me to court quiet as well? Can you stop them from being active? So this is, you know, probably 2,500 years old, but it would have been, this is the sort of thing that was written on these. So this is an actual curse, and you can see it's been, this one's been unfolded, and you can see that there are nails being put in it. So you roll it up, as I said, pierce it with the nail, and this is what they looked like. This one's been left as it is, untouched, so we don't know what is on this spell. But a lot of these things called ghosts to help them work their spells. So necromancy, calling on ghosts to help work a curse. Ghosts were very helpful people or creatures in the ancient world to the ancient Greeks, if they were handled the right way. What did the ancient Greeks, as time went on, view ghosts to be? Every major author we have wrote on ghosts, be it Homer, who we looked at, be it Aristotle, Plato. They were all interested in what ghosts were like. And my hero from the ancient world, Socrates, even had an opinion on ghosts. And this is what Socrates says. And my friend, we must believe that the corporeal is burdensome and heavy and earthly and visible. And such a soul is weighed down by this and is dragged back into the visible world through fear of the invisible and of the other world. And so, as they say, it flits about the monuments and the tombs where shadowy shapes of souls have been seen, figures of those souls which were not set free in purity but retain something of the visible, and this is why they are seen. So even Socrates himself, the great philosopher, recorded by Plato, believed in ghosts. And Socrates also believed in reincarnation. So if you led a rotten life, you would be sent back up to get it right the next time. But before you're released, you'd become a ghost for a while to try and you know, as punishment for the awful life that you led. But Socrates himself, notice he says, they flit around monuments and tombs, and they're shadowy. And we often think of ghosts as shadows, things you can see through. And same with the Greeks. And we often think of ghosts as haunting graveyards. So did the Greeks. And we have inherited this tradition. This is where we get our information from. And over thousands of years, we are still reinventing the wheel, or showing that we believe in exactly the same thing Socrates in the 5th century BC believed in. Greeks also believed in hauntings. So they believed that places, just like we do, are powerful and potent, and that you can hear things, see things. And one of the most haunted places in Greece is in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks talked about this all the time. People still go there to see if it's haunted. Does anyone know what this field is? It's the field of Marathon. Does anyone? And this is the burial mound of Marathon. And you've probably all heard of the marathon, a marathon runner. And the story of the idea of a marathon runner comes from this place. And it was here in the year 490 BC, time of Socrates, that a dreadful battle took place. And the Battle of Marathon involved a tiny little Greek force of Athenians and Plataeans, 200 or so all up. And they fought against the Persians, or as the Greeks called them, the barbarians. And the Persians came en masse into Greece in 490 BC, and they wanted to take over Greece and impose tyranny on the Greeks. And the Greeks fought, as I said, 200, 300 Greeks fought thousands of Persians at this site, and they won. They defeated them. And the Greeks fell and were buried in this mound, and this is the mound of Marathon. And Persians fell there too, of course. Thousands of Persians fell. So this place is full of restless ghosts because these men were never properly, especially the Persians. Persians were just pushed into the ocean, all sorts of things. And the Greeks were buried there. But the Greeks themselves, this is an account. This is a guy called Pausanias. He's a Greek author, 2nd century AD. He was the first tour guide. So he was the first person who wrote, The Lonely Planet. This is The Lonely Planet written in Greek in the 2nd century AD. He went all around describing the sites. And this is what he writes. He goes to Marathon. So for the tourists, Pausanias says, at this place you can hear all night horses whinnying and men fighting. No one who stays there just to have this experience gets any good out of it. But the ghosts do not get angry with anyone who happens to be there against his will. So if you absolutely accidentally stumble across the field of Marathon and you're not there to upset the ghosts, and you're frightened and you want to get out, the ghosts are cool with that. But people who go seeking them, trying to prove that they're there, irritate them and they don't like it. But isn't that beautiful idea that animals, also the horses and the cries of the horses and their sorrow and their tears as they fell on the battlefield, and the sound of their cries are also still there, so that anguish of those animals is what the Greeks said. You can hear the horses crying as well. So Marathon is a place, and I was recently looking up about Marathon, and Marathon, people still go there now and check it out and do readings and everything because of the reputation for how haunted that place is. And of course archaeologists have dug up and proved that this is, they fell and were buried there. So there's skeletons, weaponry, etc. at that site. The other place the Greeks thought, and the Romans too, but particularly the Greeks, you don't go near these places. So anyone know what we've got?
Crossroads.
We don't. If you're tad anxious about ghosts, you do not go to the crossroads. Now, these places are animated intensely, according to the ancients. Now crossroads were, this one looks quite pretty, but to the ancients, crossroads, imagine travelling in the ancient world. I say this to my students all the time. There were people starving, peasants, runaway slaves. You walk along a road like this, you're going to be murdered for what you've got on you. You're going to be mugged. These places were horrendously dangerous to travel alone or even in groups in the ancient world. The other thing was crossroads also were the places where sex workers would often ply their trade outside the city. And then rob the men that they were calling. These are very dangerous places. They'd often bury criminals out around here as well. So the whole idea of a crossroad to the ancients was terrifying. Now, because of this, they believed also that ghosts haunted, hovered, animated crossroads. And their belief was so strong that they had always these things here at their crossroads. Not this big. But this is just a replica of a statue of Hecate. Now the Greeks and the Romans were really clever. They had gods and goddesses for just about everything. And Hecate was the goddess of magic, she was the goddess of witches and magicians, and she was the goddess of ghosts. And she was also the goddess of crossroads. And she would be there, and I love the idea of Hecate. Hecate is a goddess that guides you. She's a goddess of decisions. So when you come to a crossroad, what do you have to do? You can go this way, that way, or straight ahead. And it's that idea of, oh, I don't know which way. And she's there. She's the guiding goddess. And she leads you onto the right path. And so you will find her there. And she protects you when you hit the crossroads. Because she's the boss of ghosts. So she deals with them. She can drive them off. She can send them back to the land of the dead. She can go mad on them and scare them. But she's in control of them. And so she will keep you safe if you pray to her when you get to a crossroad and an angry ghost is bothering you. So Hecate is a very, very good ghost to have, a good goddess to have around. So the Greeks, the Romans had Hecate as well, and she was at their crossroads. And she was also the god, I think very interestingly, of dogs. So if you hear hounds baying in the night, the Greeks believed that Hecate was around, and they're her hellhounds, because usually she lives under the ground, down below. And there's hellhounds, and so she'd bring them up. So if you hear them barking, she's going to be around. She starts off as a very nice goddess. She becomes horrendous. Did you know that? She becomes more and more frightening as centuries go on. But she started off very lovely and very kind. And there she is. This is an actual archaeological piece showing one of these statues that look the three ways. The Greeks also believed, and I think I've sort of foreshadowed this, that ghosts were really harmful. That usually they were genuinely frightened of them. So they thought they were out to hurt you. And some people today aren't frightened of them, and think that they're benevolent. I don't know. I've never ever had a contact with a ghost. But the Greeks generally were frightened, and they had all sorts of rituals designed to protect them from ghosts, because they thought that they could hurt you individually, hurt your family, or they also believed that they could hurt your community. And so what they did, they had rituals called, well, we would call them exorcisms in a way. They called them, they were ghost banishing rituals. And what they would do, this is in Egypt as well. So Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, would have these public rituals. And if a ghost was bothering your community, say in Egypt, for example, one of the priests would come, and in a public environment, the priest would make a statue of the ghost, and before the whole community, begin to twist the statue around. So twist the head, twist the legs, twist the arms, and then melt it, like throw it into the fire. It was made of wax, and the ghost would go. And so these were public ghost banishing rituals. Certain magicians in ancient Greece, if you had a ghost who was bothering you privately, you could pay a magician, and the magician would come and clear your house of the ghost. But these magicians charged quite a lot of money. And there were a lot of charlatans as well in the ancient Greek world who'd say, yeah, I'll get rid of the ghost for so many thousand drachma, and you absolutely not, had no idea how to do it. But you would find professionals who could clear your house or your area of these ghosts. And again, Pausanias, our travel guide, gives us a story about an actual ghost exorcism. With regard to Actaeon, the Orchomenians say the following. So this is a community of people. A ghost was running amok and ravaging the land. When they inquired at Delphi, the god told them to recover the remains of Actaeon and bury him in the earth. He also commanded them to make a bronze image of the ghost and fasten it to a rock with iron. They also offer chthonic, underworld, sacrifices every year to Actaeon. So, Actaeon, did anyone know the story of poor old Actaeon? He was torn apart by his hunting dogs. Not a very nice way to go. But a violent death before his time. Perfect ghost material to the ancient Greeks. And so, because of the violent death that Actaeon had, he just spent the rest of his time harassing this poor community. Now, notice what they do. They do the wise thing. They go to Delphi. Has anyone been to Delphi in Greece? Up in the mountains outside of Athens. And at Delphi lived the Delphic oracle. And she knew all. And so you would go to her and she'd go smell her, light her incense and her plants and her herbs, lock herself in a tiny little room, become intoxicated, her head would spin, and she'd deliver the prophecy to you. And so she tells them how to get rid of them, how to get rid of Actaeon. Go and find his bones and give him a proper burial and lay him to rest. Bury them in the earth. And notice that also she says, make a bronze image of him and fasten it to a rock with iron. And here again is that blend between magic and the belief in ghosts. You make a little image of him. If you fasten him to a rock, what you're saying is, until I take this pin out of this little doll, you'll never be able to run amok in our community again. So as I do this to the doll, we're doing this to you. We're fastening you back down into the land of the dead. So, any questions so far? So, as I said, I'm covering about 1,000 years, 2 cultures, and a tiny bit about ghosts. But before I move on to Rome, would anyone like to ask me a question about Greece?
Why did they use lead for those little things?
Lead was easy to come by. It was very cheap. So lead is a product of the silver mines in Athens, a byproduct, very cheap to get. In Rome, they'd go and cut a bit of the water pipes. As you know, the Romans, brilliant people, conquered the world, had lead water pipes. So it was cheap and easy to get, but also lead was, if you've ever picked up lead, because a student of mine quite a long time ago made me one of these, came to class and gave it to me. And he'd gone, it's probably surprising I didn't get sacked. This student went and melted the lead, could have killed himself, but made me one to keep, and I should have brought it in. But when you pick it up, lead's ugly, horrible colour. It's quite heavy, and it's really cold. It's really, really cold to the touch. And so I think it was the horrible nature of the material that made the spell even worse. Because when you think about it, amulets in the ancient world are made of silver and gold, which are beautiful. Tablets to curse people made of lead. Yep. So you know some of them were on like a strip-looking thing that they rolled up, and then they applied a
the nail.
And that other one was more like an egg-like. What was the difference between them?
The difference is, and in fact, I'm going forward, aren't I? That's great because now I've wrecked the Roman stuff. Quickly, the same idea applies. So, see, the idea, this one's had nails in it too.
Oh, right.
But the idea is, if you put the little person in the coffin, you're trapping them, you're pinning them, you're nailing them. And the same thing if you write the spell and you roll it up and you nail it, it's trapping them. It's a form of sympathetic binding magic, we call it, trapping magic. So it's what I do to this coffin, I do to you. I trap you, I bind you.
Method of keeping them
contained and trapped and bound. Yeah, so that's the idea of it. Yeah, it's a form of sympathetic magic.
It's easier to make too, I suppose.
Yeah, and people wrote letters on lead in the ancient world. It was a common form of letter writing as well. So it's very.
Was there any
easy
association with Saturn?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
lead
It's
is
connected to
Saturn.
Saturn.
With
Yeah.
magic, yeah.
So it also has sort of astrological connections to it as well. Saturn is connected with lead, and Saturn is a heavy planet and I suppose, for want of a better word, a negative planet. Yeah.
We'll have a break now.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely fascinating stuff there. Brilliant speaker. So when we were listening to that, you had a thought about one of the things she was talking about.
Yeah, basically, there's a couple of things that you can get out. Well, a hell of a lot of things you can get out of it. Really, very interesting speaker, as you say. But playing devil's advocate. I mean, if you know me, you know I believe in the paranormal. There's no skeptic bone in my body. I believe I've been poke prodded and whatever else. So, but what I'm thinking, playing devil's advocate, you could look at it. Okay, so we've had these beliefs for thousands and thousands of years, however long it is. Socrates, Plato, all these guys thinking much the same and teaching us more or less what we still think today. However, is that coming from an innate need in all of us just to not accept our mortality? Do you know what I mean? Like, when we die, we want more to be there. So, are we going to believe that ghosts exist because of that, or is it a case of where there's smoke, there's fire? These people talking way back then about ghosts. Did they exist? Or is it this need that I'm talking about? That
So you're saying like a wish fulfillment thing? Is that what you mean? Like,
yeah, more or less.
It's just saying that we hope there's something better. Yeah.
Hope this. Well, not.
But on the other hand, I think what I said to before was, on the other hand, is this evidence to back up, modern accounts of ghosts as well, or the afterlife or spirits and afterlife?
You could look at it that way. Yeah, I guess so.
So the way I see it, is that if these stories have been around, I mean, why would anyone make up a ghost story these days anyway? And certainly going back, 2,000-3,000 years ago, why would you make up a story then? And why are things so similar? So to me, this just backs up what I already believe, but belief's not really the right word.
Yeah, and I mean, again, sort of trying to play devil's advocate. What Dr. Marguerite Johnson is sort of saying.
No relation.
No relation. Let's say that. Most of what she was, or a lot of what she was saying, is that ghosts come to you in dreams when they want to tell you a message or whatever. But does that sort of demonstrate that because they were coming to you in dreams that it was more an overactive imagination, let's say? Do you see my point?
Yeah, sure. No, I think I do believe that. I guess I make a big distinction between, I don't know, the whole ghost term is a bit ambiguous as far as I'm concerned, but I believe that they can contact you through dreams if need be. But that's just my belief. Again, something I can't prove, but it's something I believe. What I found particularly interesting in that part of the talk was the lead tablets. because I'm having a bit of a background in magic and neo-paganism and stuff like that, and very much interested in spellcasting. I actually spoke to her briefly about this on the night as well. What I found fascinating, and what most modern pagans or neo-pagans do, where she talks about how when she was doing the curse or the binding of the person, they would actually enlist the services of a ghost. Where if you talk to most neo-pagans these days, they'd invoke, you know, the assistance of a deity or a god or a goddess, which I find fascinating. But the whole thing, again, you know, when you look at things like, you know, puppet magic and voodoo dolls and all that kind of stuff, it's again, you know, like with these lead coffins with the curse written on it and that. I mean, again, is this something? I think we had a discussion about this about 2:00 in the morning the other week. You know, what's archetypal, or what's, sorry, not archetypal. What is archetypal? But what is what's encoded in our DNA as human beings? When I was talking about, the collective unconscious.
Yes.
So is it, again, you could talk about this all night, but is it collective unconscious? We all have the same hardwiring in our DNA or in our genetic code or whatever, or is it real things? Could be here all night.
Yeah, mate, we could. That's pretty heavy stuff.
But I just think, I don't know. It's just maybe it's part of just the human experience. Who knows? But we're going to pull it up there, but once again, that's Dr. Marguerite Johnson, and she is actually doing a similar talk, if not the same talk, and that's only part of it, by the way, so you're not getting all of it. Next Thursday, the 11th of July, at the Museum Theatre. Now, I made a boo-boo before. That isn't at the university. That is actually in Newcastle Museum at Honeysuckle, I believe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And that's $10 per person, includes a glass of wine. Bookings 0249741400. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you for being part of and thank you, Nathan, for being part of our very first Unexplained Australia podcast. Hopefully, one of many to come. And we will catch you next time.
Adios.
See you later.
Unexplained Australia podcast, brought to you by Hunter Valley Ghost Tours and Lakes Paranormal. Don't forget to visit us at www.unexplainedaustralia.com.